December 11th, 1941. Berlin, the Kroll Opera House, temporary home of the German Reichstag. Adolf Hitler stands before his parliament, his voice rising with emotion, about to make an announcement that will seal the fate of Nazi Germany, an announcement so catastrophic, so strategically baffling, that historians 80 years later still struggle to comprehend his reasoning. 4 days earlier, Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, dragging the United States into war with Japan. But here's the thing, Hitler's Germany was not under attack. America had not declared war on Germany. Roosevelt had not threatened Berlin. Germany could have stayed out of it. They could have remained neutral in the Pacific conflict. They could have let Japan and America destroy each other while Germany focused everything on defeating the Soviet Union. But Hitler didn't do that. Instead, standing before the Reichstag on this cold December morning, he declared war on the United States of America. The chamber erupted in applause. His generals stood and cheered. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels grinned with satisfaction. And with those words, Adolf Hitler guaranteed Germany's defeat. He ensured that within 4 years Berlin would be in ruins, his regime would collapse, and he would die in a bunker beneath the burning capital. This is the story of the worst strategic decision in modern military history. To understand why this declaration was so catastrophic, you need to understand the crisis Germany faced in December 1941. The German leadership was consumed by one problem. The war with the Soviet Union was going disastrously wrong. On December 1st, after a serious defeat at the hands of the Red Army, Hitler had relieved Field Marshal von Rundstedt. The German offensive toward Moscow had exhausted itself. For the first time since the war began, Germany was being pushed back, hard. Operation Barbarossa, launched in June 1941, was supposed to be over in weeks. Hitler had predicted the Soviet Union would collapse like a house of cards. 6 months later, German troops were freezing to death outside Moscow. Their tanks wouldn't start in the -40-degree cold. The Red Army, which was supposed to have been destroyed, was counterattacking with fresh divisions from Siberia. Germany was fighting for its survival on the Eastern Front. They desperately needed to focus all their resources on defeating the Soviets before winter made the situation even worse. This was not the time to pick a fight with another major power, especially not the United States. So why did Hitler do it? What was he thinking? Hitler believed America was weak. He looked at the United States and saw a nation divided by isolationism, weakened by the Great Depression, distracted by racial tensions. He saw a country that had taken 2 years to mobilize during World War I. He convinced himself that America was soft, that its army was weak, that its people lacked the will to fight. He could not have been more wrong. What Hitler failed to see was the sleeping giant. The United States in 1941 had the largest economy in the world. Its industrial capacity dwarfed Germany's. American factories could produce tanks, aircraft, and ships at a rate that would make German production look like a cottage industry. The numbers are staggering. In 1941, Germany produced approximately 5,000 aircraft. The United States, once it mobilized, would produce 96,000 aircraft in a single year. Germany built 40,000 tanks during the entire war. America built 88,000. Germany launched 1,000 submarines over 6 years. America launched 400 in less than 3 years, along with building an entirely new fleet of aircraft carriers, battleships, destroyers, and landing craft. But in December 1941, that industrial power was still potential, not actual. America was still at peace. Its army numbered only 1.6 million men, smaller than Germany's, smaller even than Britain's. American tanks were inferior to German panzers. American pilots lacked combat experience. If Hitler had simply kept his mouth shut, if he had not declared war, America would have been forced to focus entirely on Japan. Roosevelt wanted to prioritize the war against Germany, but he couldn't do that without public support, and the American public, enraged by Pearl Harbor, wanted revenge against Japan, not Germany. Here's where it gets interesting. Think about it from Roosevelt's perspective. He knows Germany is the bigger threat. He knows that eventually, America will have to deal with Hitler, but he can't sell that to Congress. He can't sell that to the American people, not after Pearl Harbor. What would you have done in his position? How do you convince a nation furious about Japan to focus on Germany instead? By declaring war on December 11th, Hitler gave Roosevelt exactly what he needed. He united the American public behind a two-front war. He made it politically possible for America to adopt a Germany-first strategy. He transformed a potential regional conflict in the Pacific into a truly global war that Germany could not possibly win. So what was Hitler thinking? According to Hitler's naval adjutant, Admiral Karl Jesko von Puttkamer, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor actually buoyed Hitler's confidence in winning the war. It improved morale among the high leadership of the armed forces. Hitler expressed surprise and relief, believing that at a moment when the Soviets were supposedly on the brink of collapse, the Japanese attack could not have come at a better time. Hitler convinced himself that Pearl Harbor was good news for Germany. He believed Japan's entry into the war would tie down American resources in the Pacific, preventing America from meaningfully intervening in Europe. He thought the American Navy, crippled at Pearl Harbor, would be unable to escort convoys across the Atlantic. He imagined that Japan would quickly conquer Asia, knock China out of the war, and then turn north to attack the Soviet Union from the east, trapping Stalin between German and Japanese armies. Every single one of these assumptions was wrong. Japan had no intention of attacking the Soviet Union. They'd tried that in 1939 at Khalkhin Gol, and been decisively defeated. The Japanese were moving south into Southeast Asia, not north into Siberia. The American Navy, despite the shock of Pearl Harbor, remained a powerful force. All of America's aircraft carriers had been at sea during the attack, and survived undamaged. Within 6 months they would hand Japan its first major naval defeat at Midway. There was another factor in Hitler's thinking. By late 1941, America and Germany were already engaged in an undeclared naval war in the Atlantic. Roosevelt had authorized American destroyers to escort British convoys. When German submarines attacked these convoys, American warships fought back. The USS Kearney and USS Reuben James had been torpedoed by U-boats in October and November. American sailors had died. Hitler believed war with America was inevitable. If it was going to happen anyway, he reasoned, better to do it now on his terms, while he still had the initiative. Better to declare war as a sign of strength than to wait for Roosevelt to do it. This reasoning ignored a crucial reality. Roosevelt didn't have the political support to declare war on Germany. Congress wouldn't give it to him. The American public wouldn't support it. As long as Hitler didn't attack American territory directly, Roosevelt's hands were tied. By declaring war first, Hitler removed Roosevelt's biggest political obstacle. He gave the president exactly what he needed. There was also the Tripartite Pact to consider. In September 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan had signed a mutual defense agreement. Technically, the pact only obligated Germany to support Japan if Japan was attacked, not if Japan was the aggressor. Since Japan had struck first at Pearl Harbor, Germany had no legal obligation to enter the war, but Hitler had privately promised Japan support regardless. He wanted to encourage Japanese expansion in Asia, hoping it would weaken Britain and tie down American resources. Now, Japan had delivered. They'd struck a devastating blow against America. In Hitler's mind, honor and strategic calculation both demanded that Germany reciprocate. This concern for credibility blinded Hitler to the larger strategic picture. Maintaining alliance credibility meant nothing if maintaining that credibility guaranteed Germany's defeat. On the morning of December 11th, Hitler delivered a speech to the Reichstag, accusing Roosevelt of warmongering and conspiring against Germany. German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop met with American Chargé d'Affaires Leland Morris to formally deliver the declaration. According to diplomat George Kennan, after reading the declaration, Ribbentrop screamed at Morris, "Your president has wanted this war, now he has it." Then he turned on his heels and left the room. The actual declaration of war document was a masterpiece of propaganda and self-delusion. It accused Roosevelt of systematic provocations against Germany. It listed American violations of neutrality, American attacks on German submarines, American support for Britain through Lend-Lease. It portrayed Germany as the victim, America as the aggressor, and the declaration of war as a defensive necessity. None of this changed the fundamental reality. Germany had just voluntarily entered a war it could not win. In Washington, when news of Germany's declaration reached the White House, Roosevelt must have felt like he'd been handed a gift. He wrote a brief message to Congress on the morning of December 11th, asking them to declare war on Germany and Italy. Meeting at noon, the motion passed through both houses without dissent. There was no debate, no lengthy speeches, no controversy. Congress approved war against Germany, 393-0 in the House, 88-0 in the Senate. The entire process took less than an hour. Compare that to the situation just 4 days earlier. After Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt had asked Congress to declare war on Japan. Congress approved it, but several isolationist congressmen wanted to know why America should also fight Germany. Roosevelt couldn't give them a good answer. Public anger was directed at Japan, not Germany. If Hitler had stayed silent, if he'd let America and Japan fight their war, Roosevelt would have faced enormous political pressure to focus solely on the Pacific. The Germany first strategy that Roosevelt and Churchill had agreed upon would have been politically impossible to implement. But Hitler's declaration changed everything. Now America could justify fighting Germany first because Germany had declared war on America. What do you think would have happened if Hitler had waited? Would Roosevelt have eventually found a way to bring America into the war against Germany? Or would public pressure have forced him to focus entirely on Japan? It's one of the great what-ifs of World War II. Within weeks of Hitler's declaration, American military planners were meeting with British counterparts to finalize plans for the invasion of North Africa. for strategic bombing campaigns against German cities, for the eventual cross-channel invasion that would become D-Day. None of this would have been possible, or at least not possible so quickly, if Hitler hadn't declared war. The impact of American entry into the war was immediate and overwhelming. In addition to its ongoing campaigns in the Soviet Union and North Africa, Nazi Germany now faced the prospect of millions of American soldiers joining the conflict, along with millions of tons of military equipment and supplies flowing to the Allies. Germany's production capacity was already stretched thin. They were fighting a massive land war in the Soviet Union, trying to hold North Africa against the British, defending occupied France and the Low Countries, and conducting a submarine campaign in the Atlantic. Now they would have to contend with American factories producing weapons and ammunition at rates Germany couldn't match. American shipyards launching new vessels faster than German submarines could sink them. American training camps preparing millions of soldiers for deployment to Europe. The strategic balance had shifted decisively against Germany, and it was entirely Hitler's fault. He had thrown away Germany's last chance of negotiating a favorable peace, or at least achieving a stalemate in Europe. With America in the war, Germany's defeat was only a question of time, but Hitler didn't see it that way. In his December 11th speech to the Reichstag, he was triumphant, confident, contemptuous of America's power. He mocked Roosevelt as a tool of Jewish financiers. He laughed at American military capability. He predicted Germany and Japan would crush their enemies and create a new world order. The Reichstag gave him a standing ovation. His generals applauded. Nobody stood up to say this was insane. Nobody pointed out that Germany was now fighting the three most powerful nations on Earth, simultaneously: the Soviet Union, the British Empire and the United States, while Germany's only significant ally, Italy, was proving to be more of a liability than an asset. If anyone in that chamber understood the magnitude of Hitler's mistake, they kept silent. The consequences of Hitler's declaration became clear over the following years. In 1942, American troops landed in North Africa, opening a second front that drained German resources. In 1943, American and British bombers began round-the-clock strategic bombing of German cities and industries, crippling production and forcing Germany to divert fighters and anti-aircraft guns away from the Eastern Front. In 1944, American forces landed in Normandy, liberating France and pushing toward Germany itself. By 1945, Germany was surrounded, out of resources, out of options, being crushed between Soviet armies advancing from the east and American and British armies advancing from the west. Would Germany have won the war if Hitler hadn't declared war on America? Probably not. The Soviet Union was too large, too determined, too well supplied to be conquered. Britain wasn't going to surrender, but Germany might have lasted longer. They might have been able to negotiate a separate peace with the Western Allies, leaving Germany and the Soviet Union to fight it out. They certainly wouldn't have faced the overwhelming industrial and military power that American entry brought to bear. By declaring war on December 11, 1941, Hitler guaranteed that Germany would face the full might of American power. He ensured that the war would not end until Germany was completely defeated, occupied, and dismembered. He sealed the fate of Nazi Germany and the fate of millions who would die in the years of fighting that followed. December 11, 1941, the day Hitler made his worst decision, the day he declared war on the one nation capable of ensuring his absolute defeat, the day he threw away any possibility of German victory and guaranteed the destruction of the Third Reich. The irony is almost unbearable. Hitler spent years building the Third Reich, conquering most of Europe, assembling the most powerful military machine the world had ever seen, and then, with one decision, one declaration, one speech to a cheering parliament, he threw it all away. It took the combined might of the Soviet Union, the British Empire, and the United States to defeat Nazi Germany. But it was Hitler himself who brought all three together. It was Hitler who made American intervention, not just possible, but inevitable. It was Hitler who sealed his own fate